Day 1. Keith got home from work at 5 o'clock. We had a quick dinner with Grandma and we hit the road. We're all sad to leave Coda behind on this trip, especially Grant. But once in the car, Grant says, I'm going to really miss Grandma and Coda, but I'm very excited for our trip. Julia is already busy watching Vampire Diaries. We drove from 5:45 to midnight. The kids slept a little while driving, and then we stopped at the Odessa Service Center. Kids and I slept 7 hours, but poor Keith got about 3 hours sleep. Good thing he likes coffee. Beautiful supermoon tonight. Day 2. More driving, a little napping, and lots of Vampire Diaries for Julia before we arrived at the KOA Quebec City. I was diagnosed with iritis the day we left. My eyes were not very happy today. Although it's so much better, the sun and glares make my eyes very sore. So we stopped at Walmart and I got myself some new glasses. Feel free to laugh. I look horrible, but they help so much. Lots of fun had at the KOA, swimming, splash pad, bounce pillow, ice cream, and a nice relaxing fire. Day 3, on the road again. So I started to sing a little Willie Nelson, and the kids say, is that really a song? Yes, it's Willie Nelson. Or as you guys know him, Uncle Jesse from the Dukes of Hazzard. Everyone had to turn its shotgun and being the DJ. What a beautiful scenic drive. We stopped in Heartland, New Brunswick for an hour to see the Heartland Covered Bridge, which is the world's longest covered bridge at just under 1,300 feet long. It crosses the St. John River. Julie and I explored under the bridge, down by the water, while Grant and Keith went on the bridge. In the mid-1900s, there were approximately 350 covered bridges across New Brunswick. Only 58 remain today. We stretched our legs and had some ice cream, then back in the truck for 2.5 more hours. Arrived at the Bay of Fundy Park, set up our camper, had dinner, and headed to Alma. Bay of Fundy low tide is amazing. We walked out and my Fitbit says it was 4,855 steps out to the water's edge and back from the shoreline. Grant almost stepped on a crab. Keith stayed on shore, wrong footwear. So many boats on racks waiting for the tide to come back in. The Bay of Fundy has the largest tidal range in the world, up to 16 meters high. You can see 2 high and 2 low tides each day. The time between high and low tides is 6 hours and 13 minutes on average. Day 4, up early again today, which was hard because of the little time change which encouraged us to stay up too late. Off to St. Martin's Caves today at low tide. About a 2-hour drive, Julia slept. The caves were awesome, so beautiful to walk through while the tide is at its lowest. Grant almost stepped on another crab, but much bigger this time. We drove the Fundy Parkway back to Alma. Such a beautiful scenic drive, lots of lookout stops, a couple beautiful waterfalls, a suspension bridge, and lots of laughs when I needed to use the outhouse. I made Keith go check it out before I went in, and Julia yelled from the truck, maybe Shrek is in there.
Smells like donkey. What? Smells like donkey over here. It's a hole in the floor.
Come on.
Yeah, it literally is a hole in the floor. Is it even?
Clean. I'm gonna use it.
I'm gonna use it. I gotta go poop.
Yeah, I'm gonna crap in it right now.
I'll pee right
You know I'm recording, right?
Can I just go pee?
There is a bigger waterfall here. It's the second biggest one in New Brunswick.
I don't know what's going on there.
There, that better? Back to the camper, then to Alma for dinner. We tried deep fried clams, just okay, but the grilled shrimp, scallops, and halibut were all delicious. While in Alma, we now got to see the high tide, and it was amazing to see all the boats floating again and people kayaking where we were walking just hours ago. Heading to the park and a small zip line for the kids to play, and then a fire. The recap of everyone using the outhouse before I got to pee had us all laughing at the fire. We visited Hopewell Rocks at low tide. You have 7 hours to walk on the ocean floor in the shadows of flower pot-shaped rock formations. Then as the tide gently shifts, you can experience the wonder of nature as 160 billion tons of salt water slowly fills the Bay of Fundy. The tide rises at the rate of 4 to 6 feet per hour. I woke up this morning thinking about how grateful I am for this experience. I'm so thankful for Keith. He's so amazing at so many things, but he's the best tour guide and planner. Between him and my travel book from the library, we're learning and seeing so much. He's also doing all the driving. I'm also so proud of the kids. They're having a great time, but this is so much driving. I was excited for Cape and Ridge to tour the oldest working lighthouse on Nova Scotia mainland, which has been in operation since 1840. And on the way there, all this fog rolled in, and the lighthouse was closed because of the foghorn. On the way back, we found a great rock beach, so the kids had a go, and they did great. Once back in Alma, we had a delicious treat at Kelly's Bake Shop, butter tarts, sticky buns, and a donut. We all gave 2 thumbs up. Campground pool was saltwater. Kids didn't love it. Now dinner, a fire, and bed. Day 6. It's a rainy, foggy day today. We drove to North Sydney, approximately 6 hours. Raining most of the way and some fog, but overall a beautiful drive. We stopped at the Alexander Graham Bell Museum, which was great. Grant and Keith read almost every storyboard in the place, while Julia and I watched the video biography. We all learn in different ways. Grant didn't want to leave. He was really enjoying reading all the information. What an interesting man he was. So many great ideas and inventions. We arrived at the KOA North Sydney, staying for 2 nights. We have a beautiful view of Seal Island Bridge, which is the 3rd longest bridge span in Nova Scotia and crosses the Great Bredor Channel of the Bredor Lake. Thankful it stopped raining, Keith and the kids went mini golfing while I hung out at the trailer. Day 7, we explored the fortress of Louisbourg for 4 hours, which was great. It's located on a fog-bound, isolated corner of Cape Breton. Back in the early 18th century, Louisbourg was one of the busiest seaports in North America, thanks to the cod fishery of the Grand Banks. Because of its deep harbor and strategic position of guarding the entrance of the St. Lawrence, France spent 26 years and vast amounts of money to build what became the strongest, most impressive fortress on the continent. After the British took possession following a siege in 1758, they dismantled every stone and brick so that the French could never again use it as a fortified base. The Government of Canada began reconstructing 1/4 of the original walled town in 1961, and it is the largest historical reconstruction in Canada, with 50 buildings over 5 hectares. We loved the cannon firing demonstration, and we also found the story of when soldiers were caught sleeping while on duty, or other minor offenses, they were punished by being handcuffed with heavy guns attached to their feet to weigh them down and sitting on a wooden horse-like structure for a period of time each day in public view for all to see. The horse was extremely uncomfortable, and they could not adjust themselves because their hands were tied. We also learned how boat speed was measured. The late 16th century, soldiers had begun using a chip log to measure speed. We then went to the Marconi Museum, which is very small but interesting. At Tablehead Glace Bay in 1902, 4 giant wooden towers supporting a massive web of copper wire. A transponder connected to this aerial was housed in the building near the present exhibit center. A steam-driven alternator powered the apparatus. On December 15th, the aerial beamed out a sequence of radio waves. A fraction of a second later, the signals reached a sister station on the southwest coast of England. The first official wireless message had been successfully transmitted across the Atlantic. The kids enjoyed sending a Morse code message and decoding a message. We stopped at the Biggest Fiddle, mostly to annoy me, and a little walk around Sydney. For dinner, Julia and I had a $90 lobster, and well, we enjoyed the full experience. We tore it apart with some help from Keith, and we sucked the meat from the legs, but well, let's just say we didn't enjoy the green stuff in the body, the digestive gland, and we wouldn't order it again. Day 8 was great. In North Sydney for a 7 a.m. boat trip to Bird Island to see the puffins. We saw lots of gray seals and 12 bald eagles. We saw countless puffins and lots of other birds, but I don't know all the names. The puffins were so much smaller than I thought. They're only about 10 inches tall. Their beak changes color during the year, in winter dull gray and in spring bright orange. They flap their wings up to 400 times per minute and can fly 80 kilometers per hour. But they're also great swimmers and can dive down 60 meters underwater. They live about 20 years. We drove the Cabot Trail while pulling our trailer. The view was amazing. The route measures approximately 300 kilometers in length and completes a loop around the northern tip of the island. Construction of the initial route was completed in 1932, and I don't think they've done any road reconstruction since. The roads are horrible, very bumpy, and there are no signs and no shoulders. Keith made it look easy, but the amount of rye in his drink after we parked the camper told me it was not easy. We enjoyed the western side from Pleasant Bay to Chetty Camp the most. I wish we could have stopped at Meat Cove. It looks amazing, but not while dragging the camper. Once the camper was set up, we had a 5 p.m. whale watching tour. Grant said he had a little panic attack when we saw the first whale. They are so big, and we were in a very small boat. We saw a humpback whale, lots of minke whales, and lots of fin whales. It was awesome, and the weather couldn't have been better. Now back enjoying the fire, and Julia is finally going to burn her music project. We kept forgetting. What an incredible day. So many great memories. Day 9 started with a hike of the Skyline Trail, 7.5 kilometers, and it was a hot one today. But we only have so much time to fit everything in, so we did it, and boy was it worth it. The view was incredible. Then a delicious lunch, more yummy fish, and a little drive back down the Cabot Trail for a couple lookout stops. Then an afternoon of rest, relaxation, and no driving.
Stop, that hurts.
It hurts to get tickled, yeah?
You bitch when you tickle. You hurt when you tickle. You got a funny way of tickling. Go away. You bad dog. Bad dog. Bad! 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 No! Stinky forehead!
Yeah, sticky forehead.
Stinky and sticky.
Sweaty.
Sweaty.
Day 10. Drove to Halifax today. Keith watched the kids have a swim while I did laundry. We spent the evening exploring the Halifax harbor. Very busy. Lots to see and do. Now back at the camper for some fire time. I didn't take many pictures today. FYI, parking a big truck in a very busy big city isn't easy. Day 11. Boat ride to George's Island to tour Fort Charlotte, which wasn't great. It just opened a few years ago and needs a lot of restoration work. Its role was to protect Halifax, of course, but was also used as a prison in the early years. The lighthouse was established on the island in 1876, and the original wooden tower burned in 1916 and was replaced by a concrete tower in 1917. The light was manned until 1972, when it was automated. Then HMCS Sackville. It's the last of 294 Flower-class corvettes known to exist from World War II. It was so great to be able to move around the ship and explore. The ship was commissioned in December of 1942 and returned in 1982. It was built in St. John, New Brunswick. The ship spends the summer months as a museum in Halifax and the winter in a naval dockyard. Then lunch at the Bicycle Thief, which was delicious, but took forever. Then the kids had some fun at the Discovery Center. They're getting a little too old for a children's museum, but they still loved it. Back to the campground for a swim, some basketball, and dinner. Day 12 started with an eye doctor visit, and my eye is recovering well. Then back to Halifax waterfront for the Harbor Hopper. We then had some lunch and headed uphill to the Halifax Citadel. Up next, Peggy's Cove, which was beautiful, but I enjoyed the drive even more. The scenery around Peggy's Cove was what I imagined most of Nova Scotia to be like. I could have explored Peggy's Cove area for days, taking pictures and just enjoying the scenery. While driving in Peggy's Cove area, I had a wave of emotions and a few happy tears. I'm just so happy to be here with my family. It's so beautiful. We're laughing, fighting, learning, entertaining each other, annoying each other, but loving every minute. Day 13. Up early to head to Lunenburg to set sail on the Bluenose 2. The original Bluenose was launched on March 26, 1921 in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Bluenose captain Agnes Walters and the builders who crafted this sleek vessel had something to prove. Their sights were set on the international fisherman's race. For a working fishing schooner, speed was a tremendous asset. Those who made it to the port first fetched the best price for their catch. It was a real race for the hard-working vessels of fishermen who made their living on the sea. Nova Scotia's pride and shipbuilding reputation sailed with the Bluenose. From the moment Bluenose took to the sea, it was evident she was a vessel unlike any other. When she took home her first fisherman's trophy on October of 1921, the legend began. During the next 17 years, no challenger, American or Canadian, would wrestle the trophy from Bluenose. She earned the title of Queen of the North Atlantic and was well on her way of becoming a Canadian icon. Bluenose struck a reef near Haiti on January 28, 1946. In 1963, Bluenose 2 was launched. It was built by many of the same people who had worked on the original vessel at the same shipyard in Lunenburg. William Roux, the designer of the original Bluenose, endorsed the vessel, and Captain Walters sailed on the maiden voyage. Bluenose 2 was gifted to the government of Nova Scotia in 1971. It continues to serve as Nova Scotia's sailing ambassador. Bluenose came to symbolize Nova Scotia's prominence in the fishing and shipbuilding industries. She represented Canada around the world. The majestic image of the Bluenose has adorned the Canadian dime since 1973. It's on 3 postage stamps, as well as Nova Scotia's license plates. We took a 2-hour harbor cruise, which was awesome. The crew was very knowledgeable and friendly, and we loved watching them put the sails up and then down. The crew lived on the ship for 6 months and did not require any experience when hired. Once back on shore, we had a quick lunch at the water, did a little shopping in Lunenburg. Beautiful little place, but very busy. We then drove the coastline to explore and wait for the next Blue Nose tour to leave so we could get some pictures with the sails up. We drove to Fort Point Lighthouse, which I loved. It was built in 1855, the 4th oldest surviving lighthouse in Nova Scotia. One of the lightkeeper's duties was to operate a hand-cranked foghorn in reply to foghorn signals from incoming vessels as they entered into the harbor. The hand-cranked foghorn is still there today. We got to tour the lighthouse, and we all took a turn on the foghorn. A little more driving and exploring to Western Head Lighthouse. Western Head was originally established as a foghorn station only in 1930. The lighthouse was built in 1962 and automated in 1988. Sadly, the wooden foghorn building was destroyed. The current electronic foghorn stands to the left of the lighthouse. We stopped for dinner and tried a donair. It was delicious. It's made of spiced beef, tomatoes, onions, topped with a uniquely delicious sweet garlic donair sauce, all wrapped up inside a steamed pita bread. The sweet sauce is made from condensed milk, sugar, and vinegar, very similar to a gyro. Day 14 was a blast. We traveled to Maitland, Nova Scotia to board an 8-person Zodiac for a 2-hour tidal bore rafting. And boy, was it a ride. It was so fun. We did about 8 runs, and each one was just as thrilling as the first. We then jumped out of the boat to float, and we were shocked by the speed of the current. Finished the adventure off with some mudslides. The slides were not as fun as we had imagined, but still a great time. The tidal bore is a strong tide that pushes up the river against the current. The surge of the incoming Fundy tide is so strong it temporarily reverses the flow of these rivers and appears as a crest of water traveling upriver.
Now look at the shore. Look how fast you're floating.
I know. We were noticing.
Yeah, you jumped out like way up there. Wait till you try to get it out from under your toenails. Yeah. Take a little bit of it home with you. It is. Everybody gets a little mud. That one's fun.
As forgiving as the other.
No, the other stuff's soft.
The other stuff was good for
yeah.
mud wrestling. This stuff not so much.
Like, you can hear the smack.
Oh no.
But at least you identified it. That's good.
You can grab the boat too. I have the boat in here.
I sniffed it.
Thankfully, they had an outdoor shower, and off we went to explore the area. We went to visit Fort Edward, the oldest block yard in Canada, and we found a dead mouse upstairs. The fort was built in 1750. In Windsor, Nova Scotia, we stumbled across hockey's birthplace. It had trophies, hockey equipment, photos, and other artifacts tracing back to the early 1800s. We toured the beautiful Halliburton House Museum, and when we left, there were deer playing in the backyard. Day 15 in PEI for one day, and we didn't drop the trailer until 1 p.m. We didn't plan to visit PEI on this trip, but didn't need to go back to Moncton, so we adjusted our plans. Quick visit to Anne of Green Gables, which we enjoyed more than we thought. We listened to the audiobook on the drive so the kids would have an idea of what we were seeing. We toured the house and farm, which the books were based from, and learned that it was actually the author's aunt and uncle's home, not her home. Then to East Point Lighthouse, which was built in 1867 and has 67 steps to the top. Another incredible view. However, I think we'll all remember the ladder more than the lighthouse, as the ladder was very steep and wobbly, and when we needed to come back down, we could only see the first step. And did I mention the ladder was really wobbly? Julie and I enjoyed the view, but the climb down, not so much. Next, Surrey Lighthouse, built in 1880. Surrey East Lighthouse is a wooden constructed tower on Knight Point overlooking the town of Surrey. We climbed to the lantern room, walked out on the balcony, and enjoyed the beautiful view. The lighthouse also has the History of Sea Glass Museum. The Basin Head Provincial Park Beach is split into two sections, divided by a channel, known locally as the Run. Depending on the tides, the sides of the wharf are about 2.5 to 3.5 meters from the water, and the bridge is a little higher. The water below is fast running, giving jumpers an added thrill of being carried either into the basin or out to the Northumberland Strait. The white sand sings when stepped on due to its high silica content. The beach is nicknamed the Singing Sands. The kids had a quick swim and played on the sandbar for a bit, and then they jumped off the bridge. We ate dinner and then drove through Charlottetown. Back to the camp around 10, and the mosquitoes were the size of helicopters, so no fire tonight. Day 16, on the road early again today, 6:30, heading to Gaspé, Quebec. We followed Route 132, which is the longest highway in Quebec, and it was another bumpy ride, but equally as beautiful as the Cabot Trail. We stopped along the way to see Pierce Rock, which was a huge rock formation that has an arched-shaped hole carved into the limestone by the sea. It's in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, on the tip of Gaspé Peninsula, off Pierce Bay. It is one of the world's largest natural arches located in the water. It's approximately 1,400 feet long and 300 feet high at its highest point. During low tide, it's linked to the coast by the sandbar. Back in the truck in another hour, and we finally made it to Durocher Lighthouse and the Forlon National Park campground. It is absolutely beautiful here and definitely worth the drive. Because of the rain that was chasing us all day, we had to hide out under the awning for a bit before we could do a little exploring. Drove to Cape Bon Ami for a beautiful lookout and then many stairs down to the fantastic beach. We could have spent at least 3 days here exploring the many trails and lookout points. The stars are absolutely breathtaking here. Grant went to bed first, and we ended up waking him up around 10 to come and see the stars. Day 17. Another early morning, 6 a.m. Long drive today as we make our way home. Continuing on Route 132, we followed the south shore of the St. Lawrence from Forlon National Park to Rimouski. In Rimouski, we toured the submarine HMCS Onondaga that served in the Royal Canadian Navy and later the Canadian Forces. Built in the mid-1960s and decommissioned in 2000. Several plans for the disposal of the submarine were made and canceled before the Rimouski Maritime Museum purchased and relocated the submarine into its current location in 2008 and opened it to the public in 2009. The RMS Empress of Ireland was a Scottish-built ocean liner that sank near the mouth of the St. Lawrence River following a collision in the thick fog with a Norwegian steam cargo ship, Storstad, in the early hours of May 29, 1914. Although the ship was equipped with watertight compartments and in the aftermath of the Titanic disaster 2 years earlier carried more than enough lifeboats for all aboard, she still filled with water and sank in only 14 minutes. Of the 1,477 people on board, 1,012 died, making it the most peacetime maritime disaster in Canadian history. This was very interesting, and the museum was very well done. Now back to Quebec City, KOA for the night. During dinner, we asked the kids for the highlights of the trip. Julia went first, and she named almost everything we did. Grant said, "I think it would be faster if you say what you didn't like." Julia thinks about it for a minute and says, "All the driving. That's the only thing I didn't like." I think we can all agree with that, but we couldn't see it without driving. The kids had a swim and did some expensive rock mining, and then relaxed by the fire, minus Julia, because she stayed up too late with Keith looking at the stars last night in Forlon. Day 18, and our last day. We spent it in Montreal. We went to the Barbie Expo, which we all enjoyed, followed by a double-decker bus tour. Montreal is busy, but beautiful. The tour was the perfect way to see the highlights of Montreal. We then enjoyed dinner at Dunn's Smoked Meats, which was delicious. Back to the camper for a swim and our last fire.